Goedemorgen allemaal, welkom. Ik ben Carolien Ameloot en ik ben de Sales en Marketing Director van Carglass. En ik ben echt wel heel blij dat jullie vandaag, op deze regenachtige dag mag ik zeggen, dat jullie zo talrijk ingeschreven hebben en aanwezig zijn bij dit Carglass webinar. Nu, zoals je weet, de webinars, dit is al onze 8e uitzending. Onze webinars gaan over trends van vandaag, toekomsttrends, die gelinkt zijn aan jullie business en aan onze business. En vaak nog met een link naar automotive. Nu, vandaag gaan we het hebben over mythes en over misvattingen rond klantentevredenheid, customer experience. En ik denk dat dat een topic is die toch wel heel hot is vandaag de dag, zowel bij jullie als bij ons. En we hebben daar ook een spreker voor uitgenodigd, want het zit wel in het DNA van Carglass om echt wel die klant centraal te zetten. Maar we hebben vandaag Nan Russell uitgenodigd. En Nan is echt wel een experte, een autoriteit op het vlak van customer experience. Zij werkt bij Qualtrics, een bedrijf waar wij ook bij Belron mee samenwerken om echt die klantenervaringen op te volgen. En Nan gaat voor ons een tipje van de sluier oplichten rond een aantal mythes en misvattingen die er toch wel bestaan. Nu, alvorens ik Nan het woord ga geven, nog een paar praktische zaken voor deze webinar van vandaag. Jullie kunnen via de chat vragen stellen, dus dan komt dat bij ons terecht. Nu, Nan gaat zelfs in het Engels presenteren, maar de vragen mag je in het Nederlands stellen of in het Engels. Als de vragen dan in het Nederlands zijn, zullen wij die vertalen om ze dan aan Nan te kunnen stellen. En dan zou ik ook zeggen van, blijf zeker tot het einde van deze webinar kijken, want op het einde hebben we ook nog een prijsvraag. Dat zijn jullie ook gewoon van ons. En we hebben vandaag een aantal boeken die we zullen verloten aan degenen die het juiste antwoord geven straks op de prijsvraag. Het boek is The Experience Economy. Dat is heel mooi gelinkt ook aan het onderwerp waar we het vandaag over gaan hebben. Dus ik zou zeggen, blijf zeker kijken. En dan ga ik nu het woord geven aan Nan. So Nan, welcome in the studio. Happy that you are here together with us today to guide us through some myths and misconceptions about customer experience. So I would say the floor is yours and please take us on this journey.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's really important as we start looking at the relationships we have with our customers, whether they're business to business or business to consumer, because they are judging their experiences in new context. And what's happened is quite a lot of people have some assumptions about what great customer experience is and how to work with it. And today we want to talk a little bit about some of the things you may have heard and people say, but may not actually be the right way to be thinking about it. Okay. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
Well, thank you.
Good. Okay, so when we look at one of the things that we often hear is people in the industries will say, customers want to be delighted. The challenge with that is that you have to earn the right to delight. There's a big gap between what people actually are experiencing, and businesses sometimes leap over that to get to delight. It's easy to delight someone by giving them their insurance policy for free. That delights them. Not a sustainable business model, but that's part of the thinking that underpins this. What happens is across industries, and we work all globally, across lots of industries, what happens is what customers are really looking for is for you to fulfill your brand promise. They want you to do what you said you would do. And it's only after that that you can actually move into delight. And people get sidetracked because they want to jump right to delight. It is hard to consistently and authentically deliver good experiences that align with what your brand promise is. If you can do that, people will reward you for that. But it's that gap that can be problematic. And that's what we want to get people out of thinking about. Like, we need to delight people. It's about do what you said you would do. Yeah? So that's a bit of a myth as we talk through that. Okay? And some of that is that again, underpinning that same idea is that delighting your customers will make you more money. That's not necessarily true. And we saw in the last several years things where, for example, airlines were looking to delight customers. So they were bringing warm cookies during their flight. Lovely, love that. But if you lost my luggage, or if the plane is delayed because your crew wasn't scheduled right, that doesn't delight me. That's not going to make me be loyal to you. And so these are some of the challenges that people get distracted by focusing on delight because they think it'll make them more money. But the reality is, if you look at the way it builds out, and we'll show you that in a second, it's one of those things where that's the question about the experience that you're delivering. Is it consistently authentic with your brand? And the second part is then people want to exceed expectations. And that's a really tricky one. And people like to try to measure the customer experiences on whether they exceeded the expectations or not. Part of that is just not an operational framework. People's expectations are all different. And what may exceed for somebody may just be missed or status for somebody else. And that's really problematic because, I'll give you an example. I live in London, and when I moved house 10 years ago, it was just across the road, but it was an entirely new internet provider. Now, I don't know if you know about UK internet providers, but it is always horrible, right? So I went into this thinking, this is going to be problematic, it's going to be a hard experience, but I will tell you, they way exceeded my expectations. It was so bad that it was worse than I could have imagined. So in some ways, you have to think about the context because they clearly exceeded my expectations, but that was a very, very bad thing. So one of the things we try to talk about when we're working with businesses is to really understand that sweet spot, the dynamic where it actually pays for the work you're investing. Because fundamentally for us, customer experience is a business performance driver. And so we talk with our clients a lot about not just focusing on the CX metrics. Yeah. People start chasing numbers. That's not what's important. What's important is how much value does that deliver back to your business. And when you look at this slide, you start thinking about if you under-deliver on your brand promise, it will cost you money. But you can also over-invest, and that's some of the things we just talked about, right? So what you need to do is really understand, what are you promising your customers? Are you delivering it consistently? And then you can continue to move along that continuum, but it's not going to drive your business if you just try to leapfrog very high or you ignore it and it's very low. Because again, in our view and what we see over and over again with our customers is that you use customer experience to develop authentic relationships with your customers in ways that drive your business forward.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, Nan, it's important to find that green sweet spot. That sweet spot can move to the right.
Yes.
But does that also mean when it's moving to the right that you have to be more adapting to the individual needs or requirements?
So, and we'll talk a bit about personalization, but one of the things is that people don't work, they're not experiencing things in isolation. So in this element, it's not so much looking at that individual optimization, it's looking at, we look toward continuous listening programs. So you're seeing those emerging needs or expectations, and you continue to meet them. Then you can do it at scale. And that's really where you start getting the business value out of it.
Okay. Thank you. Good.
Right, so we talk about personalization, and clearly there is an important piece in what we're doing in personalization, but there is a misconception around that, and that goes back to this reality that done well, absolutely essential. You must do that well. People expect to be recognized. They expect to be acknowledged. You're even in business, it's a business relationship with them, so they do value that. But if you do it too well, it's creepy. And there are lots of stories of now when people are leveraging AI in a lot of ways, they can know a lot about their customers. What's really important is don't over-assume that familiarity because that's not appropriate. And that's part of the challenge as we start looking at kind of the emergence, is that there are baseline realities that you have to do well. And that's valued, but you do need to respect that it is their information, because we know so much about customers, right? You don't necessarily want to over-rotate on that. And some of that is, though, you also don't want to push the burden to them. So personalization, where it works really well, is, say, for example, someone had a concern and they call a contact center and they have a discussion, but it's not fully resolved. The next time they call in, they don't want to have to repeat their whole story. That level of personalization is really important, so that, again, acknowledge and recognize. That's really important. But now, like I said, there are some baselines that you have to do very well. And I'll give you an example here, which is really badly. Now, you've not known me that long, but I'm sure you know my name isn't Russell. That's my surname. And this letter came from a business that I actually do business with. And it's like, all this time, and you still don't, I mean, this is like baseline 1990s, like, mail merge, right? And so when something like this happens, it's really poor experience for customers. So again, it's all about that balance and getting it right, so that people understand that you do value them as an individual, but you're respecting.
You respect the personal borders, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Okay, so one of the things we see, particularly in B2B, is a kind of a internalized assumption that people, they hate channel switch. Like if they call you, they want to call back. If they email you, they want to email back. And I think that may have had resonance before COVID. There's some of that was there. What COVID has pushed us all toward is understanding that it's digital first everywhere. And people are not precious about how you contact them. The issue is, can you resolve their problem? If they call you, if you call them back and you don't have an answer, that's worse, right? People are really trying to solve whatever challenge or issue they have. And honestly, if it's within, if you can get them the information in a way that they understand and it's useful for them, they don't care. And part of the challenge has been, we had a global insurance company who had a very, very detailed channel protocol, and they only did that way. And what we found in listening to those customers is like, I don't want to wait 3 days for an answer. If you can drop me an email, or if you can send me a text that says this is the answer, they're perfectly happy. And it was a really fundamental systemic change for them to recognize that it wasn't the channel that was the priority, it was the solution.
Okay, so because when I look at Carglass, that's also one of the questions we have discussed a lot about. So we have the website, we have the contact center, we have chat, you can come to the branch. So it's good to hear that this is has been changing and that you can address customers and that the answer or the response to their question is the most important.
Exactly.
But if I then think about responding to the customer, what's your view about a human responding, or let's say a machine giving the answer?
So let me see if this is the slide. So this is a real concern, particularly nowadays. Businesses are trying to figure out where do we go with AI versus human interaction. And it's the same kind of clarity as it has been with the channels, which is they don't really care as long as they get their answer. And the kind of the hangover effect, which has been negative, is that early chatbots were dumb.
Yeah.
It was like you would get in this endless cycle. They say, can I help you with the problem? This is my problem. Did you want to talk to somebody? Well, I just want my problem solved. I can't solve your problem for you, so you should, and it's like this endless cycle. And that's people's kind of heritage of experience. AI done well is extremely effective. And part of it is, honestly, have you met humans? I mean, it can go badly, right? I mean, some people aren't able to really help get through that experience for them. So if you can use your artificial intelligence in a way that's relevant and meaningful, that resonates with your customers, it's absolutely fine. People, honestly, and we watch this all the time, because obviously, even in our industry, we are working very quickly to adapt and engage with artificial intelligence, can be a huge benefit to the business. But this particular piece, again, it goes back to, is this solving my problem? Does this help me get where I need to get to in my process? If it does, great. We're not typically looking for an emotional investment when we're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, the answer to the customer on this question.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So definitely a myth.
Yes, so for now, right?
Yeah.
And as we go forward, we'll see part of the challenge. This is another thing, and we see this a lot in Europe. The kind of the engagement with customer experience has really blossomed and there's become much more mature. Part of the challenge with that maturation process has been that people have stood up lots of listening posts. They're listening everywhere, asking for feedback. They're not necessarily acting on it, but they're monitoring and reporting, and so it's measured to no end. But if measurement alone was enough focus, then we talk about gym membership, right? Like you get your gym membership, but if you don't use it, having the gym membership doesn't solve your problem, right? If you have a scale, you can measure and have your numbers every time. You'll know if it's up or down. But if you don't do anything about it, it's not going to be useful. And this is part of the challenge, I think, particularly in the European businesses we're working with, is that they've gotten to a level of maturity where they measure a lot, but may have not have their listening to be able to be effective in their actioning it. And this is really important. People are asked for feedback all the time, right? And people ask, is there fatigue in that? And the honest answer is that if you are acting on it and letting people know, they will continue to give you feedback. If you don't act on it, they will opt out. They'll be like, I told you this, and nobody cares, nothing's been done, why would I do it? But the interesting thing is, it's not fatigue with providing feedback, because social media has grown human. I mean, they are telling their stories. If someone's had a poor interaction, they're telling their stories in social media. And the challenge is that businesses aren't necessarily listening and acting. And so this is part of the whole pivot in customer experience now, which is to understand how can you act in meaningful ways, and then even more important, communicate that to your customers. And there are lots of ways to go about that, but measuring it alone does not solve the problem.
No.
Yeah. So
Amen.
it's a myth. So this is another area that people there's some assumption about, like you think, great, we have no customer complaints. And that could be a good thing. But the reality of the dynamic is that if people are complaining, they are still engaged with your brand. They are still investing their time. They still want to make it work. So if you resolve that, you've changed the arc of their narrative. They are no longer complaining in social media. They're like, if you had a bad experience, it becomes, they actually did reach back out to me and they actually did work on it. And it changes that whole dynamic. We've had customers who actually managed their managers on the ratio of complaints they had. And that's not helpful, because what you want is, if someone has a concern, you want to know about it. It's not better not to know and they just walk away. And this is that dynamic around complaints. Obviously, it's best if everyone's having fantastic experiences. The reality is that's very hard to deliver. And if you do have friction and there are concerns, you want to know about it, because people are reaching out to you and saying, I want to stay in this with you, but I'm having problems. And you can develop great engagement by actually working with them to resolve those problems.
Yeah. Now, if I look at Carglass, listening to the customer as well, the happy customers as the unhappy customers, that's really something that we do. But the question that sometimes comes to my mind is, well, we do have a lot of data, but as an organization, when is it enough? And when do you take then the action?
Yes. So as we look at some of these things, and particularly in insurance companies, I would say very data-driven, measure quite a lot, and that's the comfort zone, which totally respect. The challenge is businesses, the environments they're working in, the customers and their experiences continue to change and adapt and emerge. And as you do that, what you want to develop is a relationship with them where they can work with you and trust that. And then you can pivot to a more agile kind of engagement where we talk about launch and learn to figure it out. If you bring your customers along with you on that, they will respond to that. People want to be engaged. We have insurance B2B customers who actually, as part of their kind of solving for systemic issues, brought their customers into like a chat forum where they talked about like, yeah, we know this is a problem. We know our customers are experiencing this. These are some of our constraints. do you have thoughts about it? And honestly, their B2B customers love that because, we have the same problem. And these are some of the things we're trying. And it became this whole new level of engagement and relationship because you're actively trying to solve it together. Now, I know it can be uncomfortable, but I think particularly in insurance, as we look at people's relationships with mobility, their cars, it's changing. It's going to continue to change. You need to be listening and following up because you'll see those trends and needs emerging, and it won't be 100% reliable. But you need to be able to get to the point where you have enough to say, and you can be honest with customers, we're going to try this and see if this helps us move forward with you. And people will, they'll forgive errors. Again, it goes back to that dynamic we talked about with complaints. If they're engaged with you, they will work with you.
They go the journey with you.
Precisely,
Yes.
precisely. It's a very, and it's challenging, particularly in the environments like insurance, where, it is a data-driven element. But people and their engagements are not quite as data-driven. They're more experience-driven.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another one, loyalty.
Yeah, so loyalty is a big one. We talk about wanting to build loyalty and drive loyalty. And in its broadest view, loyalty is important. There's no doubt. But the challenge is the misconception about how people operationalize around that. Lots of retailers have loyalty cards. And customers will carry loyalty cards for lots of, say, grocers and things. And it's not so much loyalty as it is discounting, as it is. Now, I am a data person by birth, and I love loyalty programs because the immense amount of knowledge you have about people's buying patterns and what their preferences are. This is great. You can use this in really powerful ways. But it's not loyalty. And then people often measure their loyalty by a CX metric, like Net Promoter Score. And that's when people are asked, how likely are you to recommend our service or our product or our brand? And the reality is what they say there may or may not reflect something operational, meaning is someone actually going to ask me about their insurance company? Maybe, maybe not. I might be a kind of private person, and why would I? I'm not going to recommend. I don't know what your needs are. I don't know if it's right. There's loads of things that go in there, and it's not behavior. It is, would you do this? Well, that's a very low bar. And so is recommending the actual thing you're striving for. So the point is that loyalty is this, and it tends to be almost impervious to price. If people are loyal to you, they're not going to leave you over a minor price fluctuation. They're not going to leave you over an issue. And this is where we keep pushing on customer experience to drive toward better engagement, better authentic relationships with people, because people don't walk away from relationships. The things that people are loyal to, like their family, nothing's going to impact that. They will stay loyal to their family. If you think about the things that actually drive loyalty, it's very different than discounting or even repeat purchase. And some businesses will measure, oh, they've been a customer for a long time, so yes, they're loyal. Well, they may be a customer because they don't have any other options. And as soon as another option comes up, they're gone. So it has to be, this is why it's a very loaded concept that people, I think, they just drop back to an easy, we have an NPS that says, we're really, our customers are loyal. And it really does not necessarily reflect that. So it goes back to those building blocks of developing great experiences, making sure that they know, the customers know they're recognized and appreciated, and that you have that ongoing delivery of that brand engagement. That's what drives loyalty.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this is an interesting concept as we start talking through the different elements of experiences. And businesses often fear getting it wrong in a big way, right? Like this is gonna destroy our business. The reality is humans are pattern-seeking people, right? So if we see something happen, be like, well, that's never going to affect me, or they opt out of it. It's bad. I'm not saying it's not bad, but it's not what drives that disconnect. What drives the disconnect are these repeated small failures. It is things that happen little by little over time that starts bringing people to the point where it's like, I just don't want to do it anymore. And that's very personal. The catastrophic failures are highly visible but distant. Those little failures that happen in your experience over time is what starts to drive that disconnect and the frustration and then the search for other options. So we think about this as a myth. And I just wanted to go back to, because I think this is really important. Businesses often focus on, something bad that happened. But yes, you have to address it, but they tend to maybe ignore the smaller things eating away at it. And there's a concept called tolerance stack out of engineering, where it looks at, even if you have a minor piece of something that is missing on one piece, and then there's a minor piece on something else, and a very small piece on something else, they start rotating together to the point where it becomes catastrophic for that individual. And so that's what I say, it's really important to stay focused on the big things. You have to solve for those. But again, that's why we always are focused on that kind of continuous listening, making sure you're solving the problems, giving people paths to better experiences, because otherwise you may miss this. And so it'd be like, oh, well, that was just a little thing, but it was like the 17th little thing. And that's really hard on people. And businesses have a kind of a huge exposure when things do go wrong. But I just want to talk about Adidas is a client of ours. And if you remember, several years ago, there was a tragic bombing at the Boston Marathon. And Adidas is a huge promoter of running, and it was tragic. The next year, Adidas, again, back out being really in front and engaged with runners. For every person who completed the marathon, they sent this text that said, "Congrats, you survived the Boston Marathon." Horrific, right? They're like, oh my gosh, people were furious that happened. So immediately they came back out with this, we blew it. This is totally on us. We're so sorry, right? So, as a corporation, they did what they could at that point. But the next year, they came back to the Boston Marathon, and for every single runner, they had videographers at 18 different points during the race, and start line, finish line, in the middle. And overnight, they put together a video reel for every single runner based on their bib number, and sent that out to them to have that experience of how they completed that. And it just goes to show some of those things that, as you start looking at this, the places that you have the opportunity, when something catastrophic happened, that was a very bad thing, right? But they came back in a meaningful way, and something that resonated with their brand. It was authentic to them, and it was very meaningful to the people who ran. And so, when we talk sometimes about customer experience, I do that in the sense that it is a marathon, right? And you may get like halfway into it and you think it's great, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is really hard. And I'm not sure how right we're going to go about this. But the reality is you have to stay with that, because as you start working through this, people understand experiences are challenging. And businesses who are working with them, engaging with them, trying to be a better partner to them, will have better experiences. And so it goes back to this, kind of our final point, where when we start looking at the reality of those challenges, it's not just one and done. As you get into this, you will make mistakes. People may get the wrong information from a contact center engagement. They may have frustrations. That's life, right? And so people understand, they carry their experiences across their different parts of their life. But they understand we all make mistakes, right? The important thing is, as you start looking at this, what are you doing in an authentic way, in a brand relevant way, to make it right? And that drives more loyalty than just having discounts or frequent user benefits. It's one of those things that says we value you as a customer, and we will make it right. And I was going to say, one of the things that Adidas came back, and it was the next year they came out with this shoe they branded as Never Too Late. Now, it has multiple meanings as it goes across all the different things in running, and, it's never too late to start a healthy journey, et cetera. But it was also, internally, it's like,
For them.
yeah, it is part of the challenge. So those are some of the kind of the key things. And so just going in kind of general context, I am a bit concerned about what people kind of just have as these misconceptions and their myths about customer experience, because you hear it often. You'll hear it in the press, you'll hear it in articles, you'll hear it in conferences, and we'll talk about these things in ways that at the top line may sound like they make sense. But the reality is these are businesses trying to improve the performance, deliver better experiences. And I think it really is important to challenge some of those things that we hear broadly and make sure that you're not acting on partial knowledge of what it means to customers. And it's a big disconnect that we see. And it's part of the thing that we're so passionate about, is that people really understand how this becomes part of their business. And it's not just a nice thing. It's great to have great experiences, but it's not just to have a nice thing. It's you're delivering better value to your customers in ways that are meaningful to them and to your business. So it kind of goes back to our understanding about those dynamics. If you can work with your customers in ways that matter to them, in the times that matter to them, you will build a strong foundation. And again, it's not just to come out with a CX metric that says we are so much better than everybody else because our score is such. It doesn't matter. What matters are those experiences that people carry with them, how well you can, and trust me, it is hard to consistently deliver on brand experiences. It is very hard. But if you do that well, it drives your business forward. And so when we look at how you can use customer experience, it's to identify those moments that matter. What are the priorities? What are the things that are really meaningful to your customers? We have a lot of clients who have like this whole set of expectations, like even in a contact center where they have to deliver all these things. And if you actually go back and listen to the customers, there may be 2 things in this list of 9 things that are supposed to be done. Only maybe 2 things that really have an impact. And so you can simplify that entire model, but you can also make it a better experience because customers didn't care about the other things. But if you do those 2 things well, you've delivered on the moment that mattered, and it will also be more effective for your business. And that's really crucial to what we do, because we always believe it's never too late to do the right thing.
Thank you. Well, I think that was the last slide that you prepared for us today.
So we can try.
I think it's really, I'm impressed with what you were saying, and definitely right. Sometimes we look at the bigger thing, and there are some myths that we use, but it all goes back to listen to the customer and actually to treat your customers in a way like you want to be treated yourself.
Yes.
Authentically listen to, and then have a real answer to the question that you have.
And I think that's really important. That's a really important thought, because it is hard, but when you do it well, people reward you for that. They will reward you with their business. They will reward you with advocacy. They will tell better stories in social media. They will bring that to life in a way that's actually more credible. And that's part of the changes, that brands are not what the company says so much anymore. It's what is co-created with the experiences they're delivering. And if you can get that right, it will become a really powerful driver within your business.
Okay, well, thank you, Nan.
Oh, pleasure.
Well, let's have a look. Perhaps there are also some questions from the customers. I will take the iPad with me. Look at the clock. We still have some time. I will have a look. Okay, we'll start with this one. They are already translated in English, so that's easy.
Good for me.
For me also. First one. Are there special customer experience concerns or misconceptions linked with insurance companies?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question, because as we look at, some people think of it very transactionally, and just a kind of a tick box, right? So like, it's insurance, I don't really care, it's not really an experience. I think that's a dangerous place to be, Because as we look at it, we mentioned earlier, the people's relationships with cars are changing. Their mobility expectations are changing. And I think what's really important right now, particularly for insurance companies, is to better understand their customers and their needs. And by engaging in listening to them and processing it and acting on it, you'll be able to identify those emerging needs and trends before it hits. So where you want to get to is to have that established relationship, right? You can call it loyalty, right? It has to be well earned. But when you're in that position, then as people kind of move into these new mobility options, you'll still be a partner of theirs on that journey. And I think the challenge is for insurance companies not to be thinking about it's just a transaction, it's just insurance. There are so many elements within that are experience laden. And if you do that well, and then you broaden your listening so you know what the new things are people are being challenged with, you can be their partner on that part of the journey as well.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question. I think so. There are other questions coming in. An interesting one also. Is a customer not loyal until the moment he or she is offered a better option?
So if it's not loyalty if they're going to move to a better option, right? Loyalty will overcome that. If someone is loyal to you, they'll give you the opportunity to continue that relationship. And that's part of the challenge when we talk about loyalty is a huge misconception, borderline myth, because of the way people think about loyalty. And if someone's loyal to you, like within your family, if someone does something that annoys you, you're still loyal to them, right?
Yeah.
That's not, you'll never replicate that in business, but what you can do is develop those relationships that will drive that loyalty. And because there are constantly new offers or cheaper offers. And if someone's going to change to that, they weren't loyal to begin with. So that's where the concern is that you get focused on, but we have great loyalty. Well, again, it may be because someone didn't have another option. Or if there's a cheaper one that meets their needs better and they feel more connected to it, then they'll move. So that wasn't loyalty. And that's where it becomes really difficult for businesses. They can start assuming they've got a loyal base and be really vulnerable to new offers and things. But like I say, as you go through this, there's so many different touch points, particularly in insurance journeys, everything from as you onboard to if you have a claims experience or all those elements come into play. If it's someone you trust and you can rely on, you're not going to change because somebody can offer you something slightly different. And if they are interested in that and they're loyal to you, they're going to say, hey, this is something that I think is interesting, I might change. If you have that kind of relationship, you can understand and work with them on that. It may not be something you can address, but you'll have the opportunity because loyalty brings you the opportunity to continue to engage with them in the relationship.
To speak with them and to listen, and then you are, okay.
Yeah, it's really important because, again, people assume that, because I have a loyalty card, it means I will continue to go there. Well, I may have 17 loyalty cards, right? That's not loyalty. And if someone is going to drop you to go to somewhere else and not give you the opportunity to engage with them, that wasn't loyalty.
Okay, thank you. Do we still have time for one more question? Okay. A nice one. Do people really think about, because you have been talking about insurance and a process, do people really think about their insurance, and perhaps also linked car repair in that case, if you have a claim, as an experience?
So, yeah, actually, the answer is yes, because as we go through life, you have so many different elements that you engage with, and each of those drives a different piece of an experience. And so if someone, totally unrelated to your insurance, if somebody has demonstrated a way to engage and deliver you great experience, they want that from you. And if you can't deliver on that because it's a tick box exercise, like, but we already gave you that, so you're fine, they may not feel that way. And I think this is one of the areas we're seeing. We work with a lot of insurance companies, and I think it's one of the areas that people are coming to probably a little later than some of the consumer goods and retailers have been thinking about it, is to really understand that each of the times you interact with your customer, it is an experience. And whether it's good or bad or ineffective, it matters. And so as you start looking at these things, again, we go back to that tolerance stack. If those little things you may not think of as an experience, your customers will. Like if you annoyed them because they didn't get the renewal or they've got a claims issue, they just can't seem to get closed, those start spinning up to a point where it becomes an event where they'll leave. And so I think it's a great time for insurance companies to be starting to think about it really is an experience. And banks are trying to do the same thing, understand what's meaningful. And it's not saying that insurance companies need to offer everyone tea and things like that, but it is like, think about your brand, think about why people are attracted to it, think about what you're saying is your brand promise, and then start looking at whether you're delivering on that. And as you start building those authentic experiences, that will drive the loyalty, which insulates you a bit from errors, from changes in the environment, changes in the industry. That will help you create a really loyal base. But yeah, every time people interact, it's going to be an experience. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, but I think I get a signal that we're going to the end of the webinar. So there are still some questions, but what I suggest is that we look after it afterwards and that we will give an answer to the customers later on.
Oh, I'd be delighted.
So, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nan, for your presentation and for your insights. Really inspiring.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. En ik ga even terug overschakelen naar het Nederlands. Ik hoop dat jullie het net zo inspirerend en toch wel soms met de oogjes open dezelfde ervaring hebben als mij. Nu, wat ik juist tegen Nan ook zei, er zijn ook vragen binnengekomen die we nog niet hebben kunnen beantwoorden. Nu, de antwoorden op die vragen die gaan jullie per mail krijgen. Dus elkeen die een vraag gesteld heeft nog via de chat niet beantwoord, die krijgt dat antwoord in de mailbox. En dan, zoals ik beloofd heb, was er ook nog een prijsvraag die wij op het einde aan jullie gaan stellen. En daarvoor kunnen jullie het antwoord in de chat neerschrijven. En nu ga ik eens even kijken naar mijn quizvraag. Dit is de quizvraag, dus ik hoop dat iedereen klaar zit. Mythe of werkelijkheid? Want daar ging het vandaag over. Als je 1 keer je klantenervaring fout hebt, betekent dat dan dat je klantenrelatie voor altijd verprutst is? Dus dat is de vraag om te beantwoorden en om kans te maken op een van deze mooie boeken, The Experience Economy. Nu, dan rest er mij nog om jullie te bedanken voor jullie aanwezigheid, voor jullie deelname. Moesten er nog zaken zijn die jullie achteraf graag met ons bespreken rond customer experience of als jullie graag het contact hebben van Nan, laat het mij weten. En dan wens ik jullie nog een hele fijne dag. Dank u wel.